Have you ever stopped to think that even the most controlled place in the world, the courtroom, can turn into a battlefield of pure emotion? It's curious, because we grow up believing that justice is synonymous with silence, rules, and rigid protocols. But when the pain of a family comes face to face with the one who destroyed their lives, none of that matters anymore. What happens many times is a collision of worlds. On one side, the coldness of a murderer. On the other, the choked scream of those who have lost everything. It is in this collision that scenes no one expects emerge. Fathers charging at defendants, mothers who cannot bear to see a mocking smile, brothers who lose control in the face of indifference. Situations that seem impossible in a courtroom end up taking shape, leaving everyone in shock. After all, how can you hold back fury when justice feels far too small compared to the pain? Get ready, because in the next few minutes you will witness real cases where emotions overflowed, and the courtroom became a stage for something that goes far beyond the law. Scenes that send chills down your spine, that break your heart, and that make anyone wonder, if you were in their place, how long could you hold yourself back? The Lindy Jones case. A father loses control. It was August 2019 when Lindy Jones, just a 19-year-old young man, became forever etched in the memory of the Fields family. He had taken the life of 18-year-old Willie Antoine Fields, and now he was standing before the court to face the weight of his actions. The mother, Angela, could barely contain her grief as she said she had lost her only son. The father, Willie Clay Fields, tried to remain strong, but with each word, his heart seemed ready to burst out of his chest. That's when the thin line between reason and emotion finally broke. The man, who until then had held himself back with all his strength, could no longer resist when confronted face to face with the one who had destroyed his life. It's easy to imagine. When pain is greater than consciousness itself, the body moves on its own. He lunged toward Lindy, as if that moment were his only chance to restore even a fraction of the justice he felt was missing. Police officers and security guards had to rush to restrain him, because his fury could no longer be contained within the silence. That instant revealed something few understand. There is no manual for the grief of a father who loses his child. That gesture wasn't just rage. It was the portrait of a heart crushed by mourning. Society expects calm to reign in courtrooms, but in real life, emotion doesn't ask for permission. And when a spark ignites in such an environment, it can easily spread to other family members in similar situations, paving the way for even greater outbursts in trials to come. The Diamond Alvarez case. In another trial, grief took on a different face, that of Ana Machado, the mother of Diamond Alvarez. The young girl, only 15 years old, had been murdered with 22 gunshots, and the man responsible was sitting right there before her. What was already unbearable became even more cruel when the defendant, showing no sign of remorse, let out a cold smile. Imagine the scene. A mother destroyed by the loss of her daughter, being mocked by the very person who took her life. That smile was the spark that turned the silence of the courtroom into a battlefield. Anna couldn't hold back and rose against the killer. But she wasn't alone. Diamond's uncle, consumed by the same fury, rushed toward the defendant, followed by other family members who could no longer restrain themselves. It took a swift intervention from officers to contain the chaos, which for a moment ceased to be a trial and became a battle of grief against coldness. The episode exposed a painful truth. When justice takes too long to provide answers, human instincts take over. Seeing the killer smile was like pouring salt into an open wound. In those moments, no one thinks about rules or consequences, only about defending the memory of the one they lost. And each case like this seemed to set the stage for even stronger reactions in future trials, as if a wave of grief was building, ready to overflow in the next courtroom. The Tristan Laro case. Tristan Laro was only 14 years old when he was brutally murdered. In the courtroom, while the defendant sat with an empty, indifferent stare, Tristan's brother studied every detail of that cold expression. It was as if he were facing a frozen wall, incapable of reflecting even the faintest trace of guilt. Anyone who has lost a loved one knows how unbearable it is to confront the absence of remorse. It hurts even more than the crime itself. With every passing minute of the hearing, the tension grew heavier. Tristan's brother couldn't accept that this man sat there as if nothing had happened. His clenched fists and rapid breathing revealed that he was just one step away from crossing the line between spectator and aggressor. Officers had to remain vigilant, as any sudden move could have turned the trial into chaos. That internal battle between holding back and unleashing rage is something only those who have tasted grief up close can truly understand. This case revealed that violence doesn't always erupt in punches or shouts. Often, it announces itself in the eyes of those carrying the weight of a shattered life. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, as if everyone was waiting for the explosion that, by a thread, never came. But while fury was contained in that moment, in the trials that followed, the barriers would become more fragile than ever. The Michael Madison case. Michael Madison was not just another defendant. He carried the burden of being a serial killer, responsible for kidnapping, assaulting, and murdering 3 women in Cleveland. In court, the father of one of the victims tried to summon the strength to turn his grief into words. With a trembling voice, he spoke about the life his daughter could have had, the dreams stolen, the void left in their family. It was a raw outpouring, reflecting years of wounds that had never healed. But while he spoke, Madison did something unthinkable. He smiled, a cold, mocking smile that dripped like poison into an atmosphere already heavy with pain. That was enough to ignite an explosion of emotions. The father, already broken, tried to lunge at the killer, and within seconds, the courtroom turned into a stage of screams, shoving, and near uncontrollable tension. Guards had to restrain the man's fury, his only wish being to silence that taunting grin. This episode made it clear how evil, when displayed so brazenly, sparks the most primal instincts in those who have suffered. It was not only about justice, but about wounded dignity. In the end, Madison was sentenced to death, but the scar left by his behavior continued to burn within the families. It was as if each case brought not just a defendant, but also a test of the emotional endurance of everyone seeking solace in the courtroom. The Peyton Gendron case. The Buffalo Massacre left scars that no amount of time will ever erase. Peyton Gendron, only 18 years old, entered a supermarket armed and murdered 10 black people in an attack fueled by racial hatred. In the courtroom, the initial silence was shattered by the voices of the victims' mothers, sisters, and aunts. They were not only mourning their losses, they were crying out against the racism that continues to corrode society. Their speeches were powerful, filled with indignation and a collective pain that echoed far beyond the walls of the courtroom. Every word hurled at the shooter seemed to pierce the air like arrows. Mothers spoke of the children who would never return home. Sisters recalled memories cut short. Aunts denounced the cowardice of a crime that had wounded not just families, but an entire community. Meanwhile, Peyton remained motionless, as if nothing could break through his wall of coldness. That contrast only inflamed the hearts of those present, stirring revolt in every corner of the room. In the midst of these statements, the tension erupted. Family members could no longer bear the defendant's apathy and surged forward, turning the courtroom into a battlefield of pure emotion. Security agents had to intervene immediately, but the message had already been delivered. This was not just a trial, it was a cry against historical injustice. And each episode like this seemed to push the boundaries of what could be contained in a courtroom, paving the way for even more intense moments, such as what would come in the next case. The Larry Nassar case. Few trials have shocked the world as much as that of Larry Nassar, the U.S. Olympic team doctor who sexually abused hundreds of athletes. As the victims recounted their traumas before the judge, the room grew heavier with every testimony, as if each word were a collective blow. Among those present was Randall Margraves, father of 3 daughters abused by Nassar, his face marked by the pain and helplessness of not having been able to protect them. In the middle of the hearing, overcome with emotion, Randall made a direct request to the judge. "Give me 5 minutes alone with this man." The courtroom fell silent. The judge refused, but that denial was the final straw. Without a second thought, the father lunged at Nassar with all the force of his outrage. Officers restrained him immediately, but that moment remained etched as a desperate cry for justice, one that would never come in full measure. This episode exposed a universal truth. There are wounds formal justice can never heal. Randall's act was not just rage. It was the embodiment of a broken father's heart, pleading for an impossible reparation. And if in some courtrooms tension manifests in words, on that day it exploded into action. The case opened the door for the entire world to reflect on the limits of human patience in the face of such brutal crimes. something that would only intensify in the trials that followed. The Quinn Bowes case. Among all the trials marked by pain and outrage, few were as shocking as that of Quinn Bowes, an 11-month-old baby brutally murdered. In the courtroom, the family was already shattered, clinging to any shred of justice that might bring a fragment of relief. The defendant sat there, his cold expression seeming to ignore the magnitude of the tragedy he had caused. For the family, that coldness was like a knife twisting in the wound. It was in that moment that the baby's uncle, unable to contain his fury, decided to act. He suddenly stood up and, in a swift movement, punched the killer in the face. The sound echoed through the courtroom, stunning everyone present. Chaos erupted instantly, with officers rushing to contain the situation. It wasn't just a physical attack. It was the embodiment of a pain that could no longer be expressed in words. The scene spread across the world, sparking debates about how much a family can endure when forced to sit in the same room as the one who destroyed their lives. The uncle's act marked the breaking point between the bearable and the intolerable, showing how fury can erupt at any moment when justice feels too small compared to the enormity of the loss. And as these episodes piled up, other courtrooms too would transform into stages for unexpected confrontations. The cases that followed courtrooms continued to become the stage for emotional explosions in different places and with different stories, but all with one common thread: pain that could not be contained within those who had lost someone. In the case of Vashon Flowers, for example, a single look from the defendant was enough to trigger a brawl. It was as if the silence, heavy with contempt, was more cruel than any spoken word. The family's bottled-up anger erupted in shouts and shoving, quickly overtaking the hearing. At Kevin Hall's trial, the tension simmered in silence until it could no longer be contained. Family members surged at the defendant mid-testimony, as if in that moment they needed to rip from him a fragment of the pain they carried. A similar scene unfolded in the cases of Dwayne Smith and Dale Williams, where punches, kicks, and even overturned chairs turned the courtroom into an arena of raw human despair, if only for a few minutes. These scenes show that there is no single mold for grief. Every family reacts differently, but all reveal the same truth: no one is ever prepared to face directly the one who destroyed their life. Each new trial seemed more volatile than the last, as if emotions were always on the brink of spilling over. And this escalating intensity left one unavoidable question hanging in the air: how much can the human heart truly contain in the face of tragedy? After hearing these cases, it's impossible not to wonder. How would you react if you were in these families' shoes? Could you hold yourself together, or would you too lose control in the face of such unbearable pain? The truth is, behind every outburst of fury lies a heart crushed by injustice. And perhaps that is exactly what connects us. We all have limits, and once they are broken, no one remains unscathed. These stories are not just about courtrooms, but about human nature in its rawest state. They remind us that official justice will never be able to fully heal a loss. But they also show us that every gesture, every reaction, carries a powerful message about love, grief, and resilience. And it is at this point that reflection begins. What would you do if fate placed you face to face with the enemy of your own story? Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these cases struck you the hardest? Have you ever lived through a moment when you had to hold back your fury in the face of injustice? Share your thoughts below in the comments. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to keep following stories that go beyond the surface. Stories that make us think, feel, and question the world we live in.